Hey, I'm Stan Gibson, and this is the Inspiration Podcast. Let's get to it. Hey there, and welcome to the Inspiration Podcast with Stan. Hey, I'm your host, and this is episode 6. You know, there's plenty of leadership podcasts out there that showcase the highlights, the awards, the milestones, the standing O's. But here, we dive into the messy middle, that space where real growth happens, but nobody really wants to talk about it. Each week, I sit down with leaders who aren't afraid to pull back the curtain on that journey. We explore self-doubt that they've battled, the resilience they've built, and how they built up that courage to lead authentically in a world that's really pushing us towards a lot of conformity. Hey, let's talk about today's conversation, though. It's going to get real, it's going to get raw, and I promise you'll walk away with insights that you won't find in any leadership manual. We're going to talk today, in my opinion, about the biggest missing ingredient in leadership today, and that's self-awareness, knowing who you are, knowing who you're not. And the fact that that's going to be magnified as we move into artificial intelligence. You know, I've always said that, with artificial intelligence, IQ is kind of being level set in most companies. I mean, it's hard to be the smartest guy at the table anymore. But the EQ, the emotional intelligence, that's what's going to stand out. That's where you have to shine. You have to have self-awareness. You have to have team awareness. That's where culture is built. That's where trust is built. So let's talk about that today. Grab your favorite drink, get comfortable. Hey, let's jump into today's honest conversation about self-awareness and what that looks like. You know, as I was preparing and thinking a little bit about this episode, I was thinking a little bit about Michael Phelps and Ledecky. You know, two of the greatest swimmers in the world. They can win any event by, let's just say, 500 1,000ths of a second over the next best person in the world. They are the best. They can go in multiple events, whether it be freestyle, breaststroke, butterfly, and they're just the best. And yeah, given, they had a pretty good foundation up front. They got big hands, big feet. They got probably something that, makes them great swimmers. I could swim 10,000 hours, like Malcolm Gladwell says, you got to do something 10,000 hours. I could do that and never beat them because A, they had the foundation, and B, then they built on that foundation to be the very best. You see, there is self-awareness there. They knew what they had, and then they built on top of it. So I want you to think a little bit right now. I want you to think a little bit about a time in your life where you were that Michael Phelps or Katie Ledecky, that time where you absolutely were in the zone. It was a perfect fit. Was it a job? Was it a relationship? But I want you to think about that. And if you're not there, if you haven't had that, then today's episode is really going to be interesting. I think we're going to, learn a lot. We're going to untap and unearth a few things that maybe you might want to consider. One thing I want to talk about is, let's talk about our genius. You see, we've all got a genius. I can tell you right now, while I can't do what Michael Phelps and Katie Ledecky do, I don't know that they can do what I do, quite honestly. I mean, I feel like, trust me, I've taken all the assessments. I've taken the DISC, I've taken StrengthsFinders, I've taken the Enneagram, and I'll talk more about those in a little bit. I've taken the predictive index, I've taken Colby, I've taken a lot of different assessments, but it all boils down to, I know that I'm at my best when I'm connecting dots and connecting people. I just, I have a natural flair for just kind of synthesizing and kind of bringing complex things into something very simple, but also being able to communicate it in a way that people understand at all levels. And that's just my gift. That's my Malcolm Gladwell of 10,000 hours. That's what I do that separates me apart. I'm comfortable in those situations. Any job you have, that's the fit for me. And I feel like I'm in that today. And I think we all start out with that genius. We all start out with that, think about when you were on the playground is, 4 or 5 years old, 6 years old. Think a little bit about that. Man, you were uninhibited. You were you. You were, think about how you felt. Think about, just had this creative genius about you that was uninhibited. I've told this story before, but it's always worth telling again. And this has to do with NASA back in the late 1960s, when there was a lot of pressure to put people on the moon. There was pressure to have the best space program in the world. And of course, this is before computers. This is before anything. I mean, you had to really rely on just raw intelligence. You had to rely on people that not only astronauts, but the people that were figuring out, how to build the spacecrafts. And, they had to think outside the box. They had to think very creative to be very creative. They had to have an imagination. They had to be very free to be themselves under pressure to where they could think of solutions and not, fall under extreme intense pressure. So they asked Dr. George Lanz, they said, what, develop an assessment where we can identify these people. These are the people that we want to work for NASA. So we put together this assessment to find out who the brightest, best were under pressure, who had this creative imagination, this divergent mindset that could really kind of think very spontaneously. And when he put this together, he did something very unique. He gave it to 1,650 preschoolers. These were kids about 5 years of age. The unique thing about it is that he then continued to give it to these same kids over the course of the next 10 to 15 years. But when they were 5 years old, that's when they scored 98% on this genius test. Yes, 5-year-old children scoring 98% on the same assessment that they're giving to people at NASA. This was, take a paperclip. How many uses can you find for this paperclip? Oh, they could come up with a multitude, a lot of different ways to use a paperclip. It was an assessment like that, just how creative were you and are you? They had this uninhibited exploration about. Then he did something really crazy. He took those same 1,650 kids and he gave it to them again when they were 10 years of age. And of course, what do you think happens? Now they fell down to 15%. And then he gave it to them again when they turned age 15. And now they're even going down further. They're at 12%. You see, peer pressure is starting to come in. They're starting to want to fit in. They're starting to conform. Norm and conform, I always call it. So they're going from 98% down to 15, down to 12% over the course of 10 years. They start to get into adulthood, and he actually gave it to people that were in their 30s, young 30s. And they scored a 2%. Yeah, a 2%. That's where we have, really come. And it isn't that we lost our ability to be creative and be a genius over age. It's just that we quit being ourselves. We quit understanding that creative juice that hits the parts of our brain, the dopamine, the serotonin, the things that make us want to do our best. I will guarantee you, every single one of you has a genius. You have a magic trick. You have something in you that absolutely will shine if put in the right situation. And it's untapping, or it's tapping into that genius that you had when you were younger, when you were smaller, when you weren't trying to norm and conform to the world. So it's a very interesting process of using assessments, psychometric assessments, which I use a lot with my clients. Actually, that's the first roughly 3 months of working with clients when I do executive coaching. The first 3 months is really around know who you are, know who you're not. We're going to go into some deep assessment, deep analysis. We're going to find out who you are at your best. We're going to find out what your kryptonite looks like. We're going to find out what you look like and how you respond to pressure when you're healthy, unhealthy, and everything in between. We're going to know so much about you that you can then start to have a better picture of what situations you get into when you can be the Michael Phelps and Katie Ledecky. This is when it's almost an unfair advantage. It's a competitive advantage because you have self-awareness. And when you multiply this over a team, now the team has total understanding of what everybody else's strengths are and what their kryptonite is. And they're not taking it personal when they have conflict now. And this is how you build trust. This is how you build a culture with authenticity. And so that's why I put so much time and effort into my clients and into a lot of workshops that I do with self-awareness and team awareness. I'll give you a time for me personally. When I was in my zone, the first time I really felt I was in my zone, because I had worked in the workplace for probably 25 years. And I would say that I was always conforming because I was in companies that were really heavy into finance. They were heavy into analytics. They were heavy into a lot of the things that, again, probably I was okay at, but I wasn't going to win any butterfly or freestyle race in those because I'll tell you what, I was competing against people that their dopamine and serotonin, all the neurons in their brain were wiring and firing when they were looking at numbers and they were becoming economists and they were looking at some very complex things. For me, again, my strength was more on the emotional intelligence. I can take those complex things. I just don't like to build them, but I can take them, I can see them, I can break them down, and I can communicate. So the job that I got was an interesting job. I was hired to be the real estate director for Wells Fargo Financial. And it was a large subsidiary of Wells Fargo. They had around 20,000 employees. I had 150 people in the department that I was responsible for. I wasn't the popular choice to come into this position. And the reason I wasn't, it isn't that nobody knew me other than the person that hired me, which was the chief financial officer. But it's the fact that the guy that I was replacing, oh, they were glad to see him go. He was a human resource nightmare. But the number two guy that was there, I mean, that was the favorite choice. That was the guy that they, and again, wonderful human being, very smart, just very talented. And he was the safe choice. But they brought me in because, again, my self-awareness and my talents, I connect dots and I connect people. I was strategic. I had spent a lot of time not only researching and teaching about finance, but about strategic planning and portfolio planning and real estate strategy. Everything that I did was the antithesis of being tactical. I was not tactical. I had this ability to kind of see the vision, the picture, and be able to articulate and communicate it. I was in my zone, but I wasn't very well received coming in, I will tell you. Funny story. Number one, if you're ever taking over a big position, and I work with a lot of clients where we talk about what's the first 90 days look like. Out of the 150 employees, I think I sat down with probably 55 to 65 of them individually for 20 to 30 minutes. My calendar was just booked back to back to back to back. And I wanted to get to know these people. I didn't want to just know what they did in their position. I wanted to get to know these people. I wanted to just listen. And I think that's one of the most important things you can do in the first 90 days of getting into any position is not coming in and showing off that genius that you have. It's coming in and assessing the rest of the organization and what their genius is and how you're going to fit your genius into that new model. So I met with everybody, and I think that was very, very worthwhile. But even the first couple of months were just horrid because, again, I wasn't the popular guy coming in, and I was battling against a culture that was kind of messed up in a lot of ways from the previous leader. And I remember sitting at a meeting, and I had my 8 direct reports. I mean, these are the people that reported to me, and this is just kind of a funny story because I went around and I wanted to know what was going on in each of their disciplines. What were they doing? And I got crickets. I got nothing. I mean, it was the most deafening silence I have ever been in. And I asked this one guy, the number 2 guy that probably should have, got the job from their eyes. And this is a guy who's brilliant. And it's like I woke him up. And so the meeting ends and I'm like dejected. I'm really just like, oh my God, what did I get into? This is just horrible. I don't, am I going to have to, start over with a new team? What am I going to have to do? So I leave my office, or I leave the conference room and I go to my office. One of the other guys one of the other direct reports in the meeting makes a beeline to my office and he almost beats me there. And he says, I just want to let you know that was the best meeting we've ever had. I said, you got to be kidding me. He said, no, that's the best meeting we ever had. He said, we've never had anybody ask us our opinion. We've never had anybody, go around and tap into us. We've been told what to do, but our genius, our natural ability has never been tapped into. And he didn't word it just like that, but that's what he was saying. So not only did I then realize, hey, I'm in my sweet spot. I need to make sure that everybody else is tapped into their sweet spot. In fact, I went around the corner and I talked to that number 2 guy. And I asked him, I said, look, I think I almost woke you up. And he said, quite honestly, I've never been asked my opinion. And I just said, you got to be kidding. You're one of the smartest people I've met. and nobody's tapped into it. So that's where I think that, self-awareness, I think that, one thing I've always said, and you'll almost hear me say this from time to time to time to time, the best leadership, when leaders learn to coach, employees learn to lead. When leaders learn to coach, employees learn to lead. So this was a situation where I was in my zone. I was that 4 or 5-year-old because I was able to use all my stuff. And in fact, one other quick story about it was we did take strength finders. And we met, and there was an exercise where we had big poster boards on the walls, and we had the strengths. Now, strength finders, there are 34 strengths, and you possess 5 of them. You have 5 of them, you just wake up with, they're yours. And I'll tell you what, they're part of your genius. They're part of you being the Michael Phelps and Katie Ledecky. There's 5. And so they put these 5 on the wall for each of the individuals in the room, but they didn't put names on them. You didn't know whose strengths was whose. You just saw 5 strengths up there. But the exercise was to go around and put a name on whose strengths you thought aligned with that person. And so there was one poster that had all of these like analytical, strategic, just command, all these very large and in charge, very analytical strengths attached to them. And I was seeing my name on that one. And that was not me. I was the other guy down on the other one that had my strengths are, yes, I am strategic, which means I can basically take a lot of strategic ideas, but I can barrel them down to 1 or 2. I can filter them very quickly, but I have what's called woo, winning others over, and communication. And when you put those 2 strengths together out of strength finders, you have somebody that's why I do a lot of public speaking. I like to be on stage. I like to communicate ideas. And so I could take their genius. I could take all the things on that board, all the things that they create, and I could break them down and then communicate them. And of course, give them all the credit in the world. So now we were tapping into their genius. They're tapping into mine. And it's a beautiful world. It was a beautiful world. Recently I gave this same exercise to, it's called the Genius Spark and developed by a great friend of mine, Rex Miller. It takes the strength finders and it barrels it down into something even deeper. And it creates a great dialogue, a great framework, a great narrative for teams. And I gave this to a global real estate team. They were all located on different continents. And so we had to kind of zoom in for it, very different time frames, but they all still had a pretty good relationship with one another, even though there was geographical differences. I had them take these assessments to find out what their genius was. What swim lane is theirs? Where are they the Michael Phelps and Katie Ledecky, each of them? And as we did that, I then had them come around, and as we talked about their geniuses, I had other people say, "Do you see that in that person?" "Oh, yeah, I see it in them all the time." "Oh, that's a definitely. That's exactly what they bring to the table. That's exactly why they're so valuable to this team." I'm gonna tell you something. There were tears in the room. Some of them were mine, and I say room on the Zoom, because I saw people start to break down and say, "Wow, I didn't realize that y'all knew that this is what I do and this is the value I bring to the team. I didn't realize that." And they say, "Are you kidding? If we didn't have you, we wouldn't be able to do X, Y, and Z." And when you start to get that dialogue going around the room, you've got a lot of appreciation for who we are when we're at our best. And we did the same thing around the kryptonite aspect. Although we don't focus on the weaknesses, and of course, I would never have anybody tell somebody what their weakness was. We had the people talk about their own kryptonite. "Hey, here's what I do when I'm under pressure. Maybe when I haven't had enough sleep or I'm overworked, whatever it might be. Here's my kryptonite." And once you start to understand other people's kryptonite, then you realize nothing is malicious. Nothing is malicious. It's just a wiring. And we typically come out of it in about a day or 2, or when we kind of reach some milestone at work to where we can kind of move on and get re-energized. But that's how you start to build trust and authenticity. This is where artificial intelligence can't take you. You've got to do it on the emotional intelligence side. And this was a beautiful, beautiful demonstration with this team of where they had different gifts that together and collectively they made a pretty strong team, but they needed to take that assessment to better understand it. So, what are you doing to find your genius? How many assessments have you taken? And I tell you what, it isn't the amount of assessments. I mean, we've all been a dog, we've been a color, we've been, an animal, we've been something. Some psychologist came in and did some kind of an assessment. The key is, what do you do with that assessment? The key is not letting it sit on the shelf. It's how do you take that and understand your own leadership style better? How do you understand the people that you work with, your peers, the people that report to you, other people? How do you take these assessments, actually start to build on your own leadership? Now, I'll tell you one thing I've done, because I've taken several assessments. For example, I've taken StrengthsFinders, I've taken the Predictive Index, I've taken Colby-A, I've taken Culture Index. So, I mean, I've taken several. I've taken the Enneagram. So I actually did use artificial intelligence. I downloaded all of these from PDF form into both Grok and into Claude, which are a couple of different artificial intelligence, search engines. And now it starts to know you. It starts to know your tendencies. It starts to know who you are at your best, as well as maybe some of your kryptonite. And then you can start to ask it questions. I ask it questions all the time about me. Hey, given this, how should I respond in this situation? Or is there a reason I'm kind of acting out this way, given all that you know? I mean, it's a very fascinating time to live, to me, to when you can put all of these different assessments into artificial intelligence and actually have it become your coach. Actually have it start to be able to articulate things that you can say, oh, well, given the makeup and my wiring, that makes sense. So that's one way that you can go ahead and use assessments and combine them with AI to start to help you with knowing who you are and knowing who you're not. And then I would also tell you, the process that I use in helping teams create deep awareness and transforming these, the process that I use with my clients is, again, we spend the first 3 months, we go into some deep stuff. I mean, yeah, we do. We hit StrengthsFinders, we hit the Genius Spark, we hit the Enneagram. But to me, that's just kind of setting the table. What I do with a lot of clients then is, we then start to explore your limiting beliefs, because we know what you're really good at. We know where some of your kryptonite is too. But we start to explore your limiting beliefs. What have you been told that you're not good at? What is it that that doesn't show up, that you need to show up to be at your best? So we start to explore limiting beliefs. And we start to take what you do well and we start to put a different narrative around your limiting beliefs. Then we have something to work with. Then we're able to go ahead and we start to say, okay, let's take this and now let's create an identity statement. Let's create who you are at your best and how you want to show up. And it isn't just kind of a name it and claim it. It isn't just put it down on paper and it happens. No, there's a lot of work that has to go into this. There are habits that need to be created, rituals that need to be created. There is visualization techniques that need to be created. Some that are very interesting that I use. One's called the intentional engineered perception, and it's a way to take visualization to the next level. So I have clients work on how do you want to show up, because in leadership, it isn't just about knowing who you are and who you're not. It's also about creating that identity that you want to take from the subconscious brain, move it to the conscious part of the brain, which is the prefrontal cortex. And there's a process called the reticular activation system. And that's the filter that helps identify what needs to be taken out of the subconscious. And it helps put the appropriate things in the conscious or the prefrontal cortex, to where now you can start to do the work to be the leader that you always wanted to be. So this is a little bit about self-awareness. Again, know who you are, know who you're not. How do you become that Michael Phelps or Katie Ledecky of each and every event you're in? And a lot of it, you're just in the wrong position. You're a great, great person with a lot of genius. You're just in a bad fit position. It wasn't meant for the genius you have, and finding that is so critical. It is so critical. I would love to talk to you more about this. If you have any thoughts on it, please go to the show notes. I want to make this very actionable. And so I want you to just think again about the psychometric assessments, just for grins, just for beginners. Take the Clifton StrengthsFinders. I just find that works on what's strong, not what's wrong. That's a good indicator of, oh, hey, I'm really good at these things. And I will just tell you, Clifton StrengthsFinders, you can go onto their website. There's two versions. There's a $60 version, which is all 34 strengths in ascending order. So you know what your top 5 are, you know what your next 5 are. And when I say strengths, I'm going to talk about energy because it's where you get your energy. Because when you look at maybe what's number 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, it isn't that those are weaknesses. It's just you don't get any energy from those areas. So just knowing where you get your energy. And if there is something in 30 through 34 that could be a career killer, then it needs to be addressed. But I'm focused a lot on the top 5, but maybe even the top 8 or 9 when I work with clients. The thing about StrengthsFinders is it can change over time. So it can change if you have a traumatic or dramatic event in your life. I will tell you that most people that went through COVID need to retake it if they haven't taken it since COVID. That was a very major event in people's lives that changed their wiring a little bit. So this is something that you can take, after you go through. Maybe you got a big leadership promotion and now you're thinking and wiring and firing differently. The other assessment that I do love is the Enneagram, which is very complex. It's very hard to take it on your own. You almost really do need somebody who's certified in it just because it's very complex, but it shouldn't keep you from taking it because I find this is part of your DNA. When you take the Enneagram, it's 9 different personality types and they're all interrelated. I mean, like I'm a number 7, which is the enthusiast. And so I'm always thinking, my mind's very active. I'm always thinking about the future. But when I'm under stress, I automatically, they call it wing. I wing to a personality type number 1, which is very black and white, become very rigid. And there are different wings that I go under different situations. And I just find that once you start to have a greater understanding of yourself through the Enneagram, through StrengthsFinders, and from StrengthsFinders, I then take you into the Genius Spark. All of a sudden, the world starts to make more sense. It really does. So assessments, psychometric assessments can be great. I don't care if you've taken Myers-Briggs, if you've taken what you've taken. I mean, they can all be great, but you have to do something with them in order to get better. So, hey, you know what? I hope you've taken a nugget or two from today's discussion. I hope you've learned something. But to learn more about me or want to connect with me, hey, go to my social media or go to my website. The website is the best place you can learn about me. Go to StanGibsonSpeaks.com. StanGibsonSpeaks.com. There we can connect. You can see me a little bit in action as a speaker, the workshops that I put on and things of that nature. But I would love to just get to know you better. And I hope that you took some nuggets from this. And please continue to listen to the Inspiration Podcast with Stan. I've got a super, super, super episode coming up with an individual that you're really not even going to believe the story because it's somebody who was under the most adversarial situation in life you can imagine. And within 30 days, through her faith, it was able to turn around. And it's just a great story. So anyways, keep with me. Hey, that's it for today, my friends. I'm out of here. Have a great week, and may you all live a rich and intentional life. Take care. Well, that's it for today, my friends. I hope this conversation sparked something meaningful for you. If it did, share it with someone who could use a little inspiration too. You can find more tools, stories, and coaching to support your journey at StanGibsonSpeaks.com.